Hello and welcome to the only football podcast on the internet which broadcasts its theme tune telepathically. And I think I'm hearing it now. And I'm joined as always by Carl Hemsley. Hello, Carl.
Hello, Peter.
Carl, we're going to talk about the 1958 World Cup on this occasion, and um, it's a World Cup which it's a third of Walter Winterbottom's four World Cups. Is it the most interesting of the four, and is it the most interesting World Cup before 1966?
I think it is. It might not be the best World Cup. It might not be the one where there's one or two really great games stand out, but there's so much about it that I find fascinating. Even if some of the things are along the lines of what might have been, I still find it a fascinating World Cup.
It is partly because I suppose it's the first time that a country wins the tournament outside their own continent. Up until now, it's been held in Europe and European teams have won. When it's been, as in 1954, for example, when it's a Germany-Hungary final, when it's held in Latin America, Latin American teams tend to contest it, as in 1950, when Brazil and Uruguay took the fight, took what effectively was the final, wasn't quite formally the final. This time we've got a winner from a different continent. And my word, what a team and what a winner.
Yeah, and I think this is the first time really that an undoubtedly great team win the World Cup, because Hungary had won it 4 years, had been in the final 4 years earlier. And of course, they were a great team, but they blew it in the final. Whereas this was a great team that won the World Cup. And maybe that's the first time you could say that.
It's also the first time we've got all four British sides have been very reluctant to take part in these sorts of tournaments. The first time that all four of them have qualified for the finals. I want to add a bit of a caveat here, though, and that is the effect of Munich on this. The shadow of Munich hangs over all four sides, I think, very strongly. Not
Yeah.
just the way that it hangs over England, having lost, I think, certainly three players to Munich, Byrne,
Definitely.
Edwards, and Taylor, but also possibly Pegg, the winger, and maybe Charlton is a casualty in a sense. Bobby Charlton is a casualty in this too.
He went, but he wasn't, but he was under a lot of strain.
He was. I also wonder if Coleman wouldn't have got a
I was,
chance.
I was, you just beat me to that, Peter. I was going to say, I think Coleman was at least an outside chance, and maybe more have been in the squad.
It's funny how rarely he's mentioned, but I think he had such potential, and I mean, he's rarely mentioned among the Manchester United players who missed out on this kind of level of international competition. But he really was a class player, and I can't help feeling that he may have been a figure in 1966. We may have mentioned this before. Um,
Yes,
but add to that the fact that Scotland have lost their manager because their manager
yes.
was Matt Busby. The Wales have had their manager's attention distracted, if I can put it that way, because their manager is Jimmy Murphy. He's the Manchester United trainer, and Manchester and Northern Ireland have lost their centre half Jackie Blanchflower,
Jackie Blanchard, yes.
resulting, as Brian Glanville puts it, in Danny Blanchflower having to abandon a sort of more attacking role and to play a more defensive midfield role. I mean, there's a lot of manoeuvring about that has to happen with Northern Ireland before they can get their team right. They do get the team right, but they miss Jackie Blanchflower, who's an injured but has had to retire and not able to continue. So, in many ways, I think it's underestimated really the effect of Munich on this World Cup. I don't know if that
I
makes
think that's
sense.
fair. I mean, I think undoubtedly England were hit the most, but you're absolutely right in what you say about that to a degree they all were.
The the groups of four groups. So let's look at the structure. There are four groups of four,
Yeah, I mean,
and
in a way, I think in some ways, I think 1958 is the first modern World Cup in the sense that previous World Cups, the formats were all kind of higgledy-piggledy. In 1954, there'd been a group, in previous World Cups, was it 50 or 54, there'd been a group with two teams in
oh,
it.
50, no, 1950, yes. I think
In
Uruguay,
1950,
isn't it? Don't
in
they get to
1950,
semi?
yeah.
They play one game and get to the semi-final, something like
Yeah,
that.
in 1954, it was groups of three, but only playing two games. There were all kinds of strange permutations in formats in World Cups. This was the first time, I think, that they hit on what I think is still the classic World Cup
Yeah,
format. Four groups of four teams,
yeah.
and then into a knockout stage with the quarterfinals. And this is what lasted until 1970. There's one caveat with 58, which I think was a big problem with the tournament, which was the playoffs that they had
Yes, I agree.
between the group stage and the quarterfinals.
Yes.
That's probably something we'll come on to. But other than that, I think this is the classic format and they've got it right. And that's part of the reason why I think of it as the first modern World Cup.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a very good point. And you're absolutely right about the playoffs because one dreams of a penalty shootout in some of these games. The idea that teams have to play a game after two days of
Yeah.
R&R and then go again 2 days later is is really a tough call. By the way, we ought to mention the fact that behind me is the Welsh team, and I think above my right hand side, above my right shoulder, is standing is John Charles. And you take a look at John Charles, who's their best player. What a man mountain he is.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
then sitting just in front of him, Ken Jones, Cliff Jones, the Tottenham winger in the double side. And above your right shoulder, I can see Bobby Robson, future England manager, and
Yeah.
among others, Billy Wright, of course, sitting. So that was the squad for the England squad, I think, uh, for the World Cup, and it is the Welsh team for their World Cup. Northern Ireland were kind of very rather unexpected guests at this feast. Extraordinary how they qualified. They beat
Yeah.
Italy and Portugal. They put
It,
Italy
it was it was
out of the
amazing.
tournament. And
Yeah. I mean, the stories with qualification for both Wales and Northern Ireland were very strange because Ireland played a game against Italy
they did.
where the Italians insisted that the game be changed to a friendly
Yeah.
because they hadn't got the right
Referee.
referee.
They didn't have a ref.
He'd been stuck in
It's a
transit or
different
something,
world.
and it cost, but that cost the Italians
It did.
um, because they that the result they got in that game, which I think was a draw, would have got them through, but they had to replay the match.
Yes. The next
Um,
day.
and then yes, and then Northern Ireland won. So the Italians arguably shot themselves in the foot there. Um, but Northern Ireland did nevertheless remarkably well to qualify ahead of both Italy and Portugal.
It's a tough
Fantastic.
group. They're in group one. It's a tough group. They're in there with Czechoslovakia, who are a big sort of fish in Eastern European football, but actually do have a global presence in football. And Germany, the holders of the tournament from 54, West Germany, I should say, and Argentina, who are always, a tough
And
nut
I
to
mean,
crack.
I think Argentina are one of the most fascinating teams in this tournament because only a year earlier they'd won the South American Championships. They'd beaten Brazil 3-0. In To the eyes of the Argentinians, this was a golden age of Argentinian football. Their consistency was amazing. In the previous 11 South American Championships they've been in, they were runners up three times and winners eight.
Wow.
But what had happened in the meanwhile since 57 is that um, four of their best forwards had gone to play in Italy, and they decided that they wouldn't pick players who were playing over there. And this side, who should have been one of the favourites, um, ended up falling apart. And it was really traumatic for Argentinian football because they thought that they had one of their great teams ever, uh, and they didn't get out of the group stage.
No, they
And
didn't. I think that they only get one win, and that's against Northern Ireland. Other than that, Northern
They
Ireland,
beat Northern Ireland. By all accounts, were quite lucky, but the Czechoslovakia thrashed them 6-1 in the last group game, and they
yes,
were humiliated.
yes. Northern Ireland played Czechoslovakia twice. They played them once in the sort of group game
Yeah.
when they beat them 1-0, and once in the playoff for the group where they beat them 2-1. Both times they come from behind in that second game, the real critical game, this playoff game,
Mm.
um, with a fifth goal by Peter McParland. Now, Peter McParland
Yeah.
there are a lot of goals in this World Cup. That's worth bearing in mind. But
Yes.
McParland
He did
scores
good
five,
time.
and there won't be many British players who've scored more than that. He had a bit of a year, didn't he? Because in 57 he'd won the FA Cup for Aston Villa
Yeah.
with 2 goals in the cup final, and here he is at the World Cup finals with 5 goals in 4 games. Extraordinary achievement, really. But the Northern Irish find a way of getting through, and they're losing players, by the way, along the way, because, for example, Harry Gregg, who turns out to be the goalkeeper in the team of the tournament, so officially
Right?
the best goalkeeper in the world, they lose him after 3 games. Up Richard comes in for the playoff game against Czechoslovakia and breaks the hand. The goalkeeper breaks the hand. So by this stage, Northern Ireland are running out of players, and I think that is actually probably true for Wales as well. So
Yeah,
um,
it was a problem. But when you look, the population of Northern Ireland, when you look at the quality in that side, and it's astonishing for the size of the country. Greg was a brilliant keeper. Blanchflower, absolutely top class player. McParlin, he's just been talking about McElroy. This was
Billy Bingham,
really, really high quality. Billy Bingham was a terrific winger. It's really phenomenally high quality considering the pool of players. But I think they've got great leadership in the sense of the manager, who
yeah,
was one of their all-time great players in Doherty.
yeah.
Uh, and of course, I mean McElroy I think was a leader, but of course more than anybody you'd got Danny Blanchflower, who came out with the great line that their plan was to equalise before the other team scored,
Yes, that's very true. That's exactly right. And
which is kind of what they did. And yeah, so a remarkable achievement to get to the World Cup in the first place, and then to get out of the group stage. It was a fantastic achievement.
it was. We have to move on. Group two
Yeah.
is tough too for Scotland. Yugoslavia, who've just beaten
Oh,
England 5-0. I mean, a
yes.
really top draw European side. Paraguay, a little bit of an unknown quantity, who turn out actually pretty good, and France, who end up in the semi-final.
Yeah.
So it's a hell of a group for Scotland. Actually, they don't really negotiate. But I've got to read you a quote I found by from Dave Mackay about Scotland's preparation. Now, bear in mind that Scotland, their manager was Matt Busby. They had really a lot of very good players with quite a strong. It's
Yeah.
got a strong home bias, by the way. There's 16 of them. I counted 16 of the 22 are home players. Matt Busby is out of the picture. This is what Dave Mackay says in his autobiography.
Oh, yeah.
Matt had an altogether more serious battle to fight, he says. Why the Scottish authorities did not replace him is beyond me. Can you imagine, says Dave Mackay, an international side being allowed to travel to the World Cup finals without a manager? As it happened, Tommy Docherty, one of the players, filled the vacuum as best he could. He was merely a player with no official sanction. He was not even the captain and was not selected to play in any of the games. But in times of crisis, leaders emerge. Now, if you look at Google and ask Google who is the Scotland manager in the 1958 World Cup, it will tell you it's Dawson Walker. But Dave Mackay is quite clear about this. Scotland
Mm.
had no manager in the World Cup in
Yeah.
1958,
Yeah.
and little wonder then perhaps that they founder and no, did it respectably, but they get 1 point out of 6.
But I mean, it seems to me to be such a Scottish performance in the World Cup. In that they started off by getting a draw with Yugoslavia,
They
which
did.
is a very creditable result.
Hmm.
And then the next game was against Paraguay, who'd lost 7-3
Yes.
to, to France. Uh, what a game that must have been. And yet somehow that was the game they lost 3-2 to Paraguay.
Hmm.
And then against France, they only lost 2-1.
Hmm.
And we know what a good side that France side was. I don't know whether part of it was, you mentioned Dave Mackay, who must be one of Scotland's greatest ever players,
Yeah.
but he only played in the third
Yes.
of those games. Now whether 1958, it's probably pre-Mackay being at his real peak, but it's still hard for me to imagine that he should have been playing in all the games, given what a great player he was. Um, and it just seems, yeah, you think of Scotland, I think of 1978, that a side that manages
Yes.
to draw with Iran and beat Holland. It to me, 58 has that kind of feel to it, that you know games where they seem to perform reasonably well with Yugoslavia and France, despite losing, and yet conspire to lose to Paraguay.
We have to move on. So on to Group 3 and to Wales, who come up against Hungary, Mexico, and Sweden, the hosts. So again,
I think,
just another
yeah,
tough group. Oh,
it is. Yeah, I think we've got to say something about how Wales qualified because it says so much about football at the time that Wales only finished second in their group, and so they hadn't really qualified. But what happened was that Israel qualified sort of from the Africa Asia section, but literally didn't play a game because other sides dropped out. Turkey were peeved because they were put in the Asian group rather than European. Egypt boycotted because Israel were in it. Indonesia wouldn't play because of political problems at home, and Sudan boycotted it. So Israel emerged without playing a game, and FIFA introduced a rule that said you can't do that. You've got to play somebody. So
but
all
then
the names.
Didn't Belgium then say we're not playing them
Yes,
either?
yeah.
So,
So Uruguay said, "Don't even put us in the hat." All the other second places went in the hat. Belgium were pulled out, as you say, and said no thanks. And so then Wales were drawn out of the hat to play Israel, and they beat Israel home and away. But what a convoluted way to qualify.
okay,
Um,
yes, sorry.
and yet, when they got there, they did more than more than respectably. They did very well.
Well, in their three group games, they get three draws. So they get a draw against Hungary in the first one, and Hungary, bear in mind, only 5 minutes away, from 5 years away from that the great Hungarian team of 1953. But by this time, there's been an invasion of their country. As it happens, a lot of Hungarian players were out of the country at the time and stayed out of the country quite understandably. Um, and so this Hungarian team is a bit too inclined to put the boot in, I think, and it sees its best chance of beating Wales as being to give them a good kicking. And they played them twice, of course, because they played them in the playoff, and
Yeah,
in the process managed to basically kick John Charles out of the tournament in the same way that Pele was kicked out of England in '66. I
yeah.
think John Charles
No,
was kicked out in '58 by the Hungarians. They're a completely unpleasant bunch in my opinion, a real letdown of Hungarian for footballing traditions. But Wales get a draw against Hungary. They get a draw against Mexico, and by the time they come to meet Sweden, the Sweden have already got two wins. Wales have got two draws, and it suits both sides to get a draw, I think, or to settle for a draw. It's a 0-0 game. It absolutely stinks the place out. Nobody's got a good word to say for it, but it puts Wales through to the playoff, and there they even meet Hungary again. And this is the moment when this extraordinary goal takes place, where the ball is really, I mean, you can see how Wales are playing because they're playing so defensively. By the time that this particular Welsh attack takes place, there are two Welsh players in the Hungarian half, one of whom is John Charles, who spoons the ball on to Ivor Allchurch. And the ball, I think it's fair to say, is coming over his shoulder, and
yeah.
he spanks or leathers a 40-yard volley. I've got, according to Brian Glanville, a remarkable 40-yard volley, says Brian Glanville, and it's on YouTube. It can be seen, and it's an astonishing goal. Funnily enough, the only goal I can think which is similar to it is by Gareth Bale, who
Ah, okay.
belts one in off with his left foot, of course, from a very similar position. The ball is crossed, and he volleys it right into the same sort of goalkeeper's left-hand side,
Mm.
the top corner. But it's a formidable goal. The tragedy is the crowd was 2,800, so hardly
Yeah.
anybody actually saw the goal live. But nevertheless, the Welsh have come through the group and have come through the playoff and are into the quarterfinals, having joined the party fairly late.
And again, I mean, a bit like Northern Ireland, a small country, but the number of players that were top class. You've mentioned John Charles, and undoubtedly he was a star, but Cliff Jones, top class. You've just mentioned Ivor Allchurch, who was a very good player. John Charles's brother, Mel Charles, he was excellent in this tournament at centre half, and a goalkeeper.
Goalkeeper, good. Yeah, very good.
I mean, we said that you rightly said that Greg was voted the keeper of the tournament, but I think Kelsey he was close to him. Uh,
Yes, and
a
I
brilliant-
mean, Dave Bowen of Arsenal was of course the Welsh captain, and
yeah,
they actually were missing quite a few players for different reasons, quite odd reasons. Some of the players had fallen
yeah,
foul of the Trevor Ford, who's a really good striker.
Yes.
He's not going because he's no. I think he's even playing in the country at this time. I think he's still playing in
This
Holland at that time.
It was,
Um,
yes.
Derek Tapscott has got. There's been some question about money changing hands for in dubious circumstances, so he's not available. And a Busby Babe, Kenny Morgans, who
Yeah.
perhaps should be playing, would have been on the plane, but for I think he was ill. He would have may have been playing for Wales actually. That may be why he wasn't on the plane. But he's not picked for the World Cup either. So um,
And it was strange that they didn't take as many players as they could in order to save some money, and yet still found the money for countless officials. When I was reading about the Wales's preparation for games and so on, it made me think, well, Roy Keane in 2002,
yeah,
it was nothing compared
no,
to Wales, turning up for the playoff in Israel without a football to practice with.
yes, they brought no
Uh,
football. They forgot the
and
ball.
they could run around. They could run around the field, but
Yes.
that was it. I
Apparently,
mean,
the first thing they did was they went to the local sports shop and bought some footballs.
yeah, it's
It's extraordinary.
absolutely
I like the story. I
astonishing.
like the story that Wales draw their first three games, and unexpectedly they get this playoff opportunity, and all the suits have to fly back to London because their tickets are booked for the day after the first three games, and so they're not expecting Wales to do anything, as make it quite clear. Um,
Yeah,
the tickets tell you what they thought. We got to move on to England in Group 4.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, what a group this was. I mean, these days they call it the group of death with Brazil,
Yeah,
Russia,
yeah,
and England in it,
yeah.
as well as Austria. But it was those three should have been three of the favourites. But I think the part of the problem with this group was that we've talked about how England were weakened because of Munich, where they lost. Certainly, the three really important players were Byrne, Tommy Taylor, the centre forward, and obviously Duncan Edwards, who could have been a star of the tournament,
Yes,
maybe as much as Pele.
yes,
But the Soviet Union, they had their problems because their star player, Eduard Streltsov, um, had been arrested, accused of rape,
mm,
and they were missing him. The captain was injured. There were another couple of players involved in this sort of scandal who didn't turn up, um, and so they were grossly weakened. I mean, Strautsov is fascinating. The great Jonathan Wilson, has got a bit of an obsession about him, written a novel about him, and covers him in his very good podcast. It was what it was. Uh, this is a player who could have been again a star of the tournament, maybe to match Pele, but England missed Edwards. The Soviet Union missed Streltsov, but Brazil eventually had Pele, although he was missing for the first couple of games with injury.
yes. I mean, it's almost as if you're saying that to win one of these tournaments, you've got to get your best players out onto the pitch, and you've got to keep them there because
Yeah.
because obviously. So, but one of the things that strikes me about the England games here, so there's a 2-2 draw with the Soviet Union, a 0-0 draw with Brazil. The first time there's been a 0-0 draw in the World Cup finals, apparently. So I was reading.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and then a 2-2 draw with Austria. So again, like the Welsh, three draws is enough to get them into this sort of group playoff.
Mm.
What strikes me about those games is that, I mean, it seems to me there's a lot of whinging about about the games from England's point of view. There's quite a strong feeling that the referees were out to get them. For example, in the first game, it get 2-2 against the Soviet Union, but a goal disallowed by a Bobby Robson goal disallowed for nobody's quite sure why. Maybe offside, maybe there was a foul. I think
Mm.
um, Bobby Robson himself in one of his autobiographies says it's an offence, he calls it, but it's not clear what it is. Bobby Robson gets another goal against Austria in the third game, which is ruled out. Um, uh, there's a late penalty call by Derek Kevan for England against Brazil in the second game, which
Yeah.
isn't recognised. And this seems to be, an awful lot. And then when they come to the playoff game in against the Soviet Union in at the end of the three group games, again, we've got this same sort of sense of bad luck or bad omen or whatever hanging over the England side. They hit the post twice and the ball comes out. The Soviet Union hit the post once, and the ball goes in, and England lose 1-0 and are out of the tournament. Do you know, is that fair, do you think? Or is it, it just seems
Yeah, I mean, you
ill-starred,
could
this tournament
say
suddenly.
slightly unlucky, but I mean, I think it really cost them not beating Austria because if they'd beaten Austria, they wouldn't have needed to go into the playoff.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, and you do wonder about some of the selections because Bobby Charlton was in the squad
yeah.
and didn't kick a ball, and he played really well for Manchester United post Munich, especially in their FA Cup run. And you do wonder whether he might have made a difference.
Oh, I think
Uh,
for sure. He doesn't know why he's left out. The press are clamoring for him. When Walter Winterbottom gets back to England, the first question from his son is, "Why didn't you pick Bobby Charlton?" Bobby
mm,
Charlton himself is left really to kick his heels through these three games. He thinks he's a scapegoat for the failings of the England performance in Yugoslavia when they lose 5-0.
yes,
Um,
yes,
he thinks he's being made a scapegoat for that. He's the only one dropped, basically.
yeah,
I mean, it is a really odd. We've had so much of this over the years, haven't we? The England public wants to see such and such a player, but the England
yeah,
manager decides it's. I remember Paul Gascoigne being dropped after the 1990 World Cup by Graham Taylor, replaced by Gordon Cowans. We've had so much of this over the years,
yes,
and
yeah,
we're almost inured to it. Um, England squad was inexperienced. McDonald, the goalkeeper, Banks, the left back, Clamp, the wing half, Robson and Slater, another wing half, have six caps between them. They play. When you look at
yeah,
the squad, there's two players with some experience in it, Tom Finney and Billy Wright.
yes,
Really, nobody else has. Well, Johnny Haynes has got 20 caps.
yeah.
The
It was
rest are
interesting that
single figures.
I think one thing that surprised me a little bit was how good that keeper McDonald was. I
Hmm.
don't think I'd realised. He apparently in the voting for the European Player of the Year that year, he was in the top 11.
Oh, okay, gosh, yes, interesting.
But he was incredibly unfortunate because he got a very serious injury.
Yes, he did. Yes,
I think the following year
yes,
uh, finished him off. So
he did.
in my ignorance, I was thinking of keeper as a bit of a weakness
Hmm.
in that England side,
Hmm.
as it had been earlier in the 50s. But I actually think it appears that's not the case. He was actually quite a strength in that side. He was he like Wales and Northern Ireland. England had a very good keeper in that tournament. But you're right, there was still a lot of inexperience. Um, and yeah, and maybe poor selection.
I think so. Yeah, some maverick selections, and I think the fact that they had half the team lost at Munich, um, they almost, you could say they almost had no chance of pulling this one off. Did Carl, looking at the four groups
Yeah,
and the three games? So I just want to look at the three games the first three games, not the playoff game, but the first three games that the British teams played in those four groups. So we're looking at
yeah.
12 games effectively. Um, how many of those games did the British teams win out of the 12?
Oh, good question. Well, was it literally won
It was
by Northern
literally
Ireland?
won by Northern Ireland.
Isn't it strange? Because you think of Northern Ireland and Wales doing really well, which is they did. But yeah,
Yes.
you put it like that. That's just yeah. I'd not looked at it in that way.
There were a lot of
You're
draws.
right.
The Welsh drew all three of their games and then won their group playoff.
Yeah,
England drew all three of theirs and then lost their playoff game. But the fact is that the results themselves, okay, accepted that Munich threw a shadow over all of it. But even so, for a very successful World Cup in many ways, you have to say this was. But actually, the results don't really back you up
yeah.
in that
I
sense.
mean, I suppose to be fair, England may be underperforming by drawing three games,
Yeah.
whereas Wales with three draws and Northern Ireland a win, a loss, and a draw are, I would say they're punching above the weight for the size of the country.
Oh, certainly.
Um,
I think a very good example of that is that when FIFA put the word out among the constituent FAs that they would like each FA to provide the names of 40 players from whom their final squad of 22 would be chosen. Northern Irish FA had to write back and say, well, we haven't got 40 players. We can't
Yeah,
give you 40 names. We're not
yeah,
looking at 40 names. We'd do well to get 22. And indeed
yeah.
they did. So, okay, well, that's the first half of our analysis or exploration of the 1958 World Cup complete. We're going to go on after the break to look at the sort of playoff and then the in more detail and then the knockout stage of the 58 World Cup. So all very interesting, Carl, and we'll see you after the break. Bye bye.
Thanks, Peter. Bye.
Bye bye.